He's so naive, he actually thinks we'll ever pay him back. Tonight's dinner, he's footing the bill. I froze when I heard those words. The voice was sharp, mocking, and it belonged to my daughter-in-law, Meredith. She didn't know I was just a few feet away, standing near the bar of the Mountain Lake restaurant. My son, Daniel, sat beside her, his glass raised, laughter spilling from his lips. The laughter stung worse than any slap across the face. I had been told the family dinner was cancelled, that there was a mix-up with the reservation. I believed him because he is my son. I stayed home that evening, thinking maybe next time. But curiosity tugged at me, and something in my gut told me to stop by. That's when I saw them. Daniel, Meredith, her parents, all gathered around a polished table, plates full, wine glasses shining in the dim light. And then those words. I swallowed hard, my throat burning as if I had gulped down fire. 40 years at the sawmill, every dollar saved, every sacrifice made, all for the boy who now sat mocking me with strangers. Yet as my chest tightened with humiliation, something else stirred within me, something I had buried for too long. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not remain the quiet fool they thought I was. No, this time they would learn. When I walked out of that restaurant, the night air clung to me like damp cloth. The street lights hummed, the mountain breeze carried the faint smell of pine, and I felt older than my 65 years. My boots scraped against the sidewalk, each step heavier than the last, and as I made my way home I thought about the long road that had led me to this moment. I was born and raised in this same mountain town. The summers here are warm but never scorching. The evenings cool enough for a man to sit on his porch with a glass of iced tea and let the crickets sing. My father was a logger, my mother a homemaker, and I followed the same trail my old man walked before me. I started at the sawmill when I was barely 18, my hands raw and blistered by the second week, my back aching like it belonged to someone twice my age. Yet the years hardened me. The wood and the steel became part of me, and before long, the rhythm of the machines was as familiar as the beat of my own heart. 40 years I gave that mill. 40 summers, 40 winters, 40 Christmas mornings, when I kissed Linda's cheek and headed out before dawn, so that my boy could open gifts under a tree lit with more than just paper stars. The mill didn't make me rich, but it made me steady. I learned to live without asking much from life, except a roof that didn't leak, food that filled the belly, and laughter at the supper table. Linda. She was the laughter. She came into my life like sunlight breaking through fog. I met her at the town fair in '79. She had hair the color of chestnuts and eyes that carried kindness like water in a deep well. We married young, moved into the wooden house I built with my own hands, and planted an apple orchard behind it. Those trees still stand, crooked now, but alive. She gave me one son, Daniel, and for years that boy was my whole world. Linda passed away 3 years ago. Cancer crept into her body like an uninvited guest and stole her breath before I had the chance to hold her one last time without tubes and needles. Since then the house has felt hollow. The silence inside it is so thick some nights, I think it might smother me. I keep her photograph on the mantel, her smile frozen in time, and I talk to it when the loneliness gnaws too deep. Daniel was 12 when he told me he wanted to be more than a mill worker. I remember kneeling beside him while he worked through his homework, the smell of pencil shavings on the table, his small hands smudged with graphite. He said he wanted to wear a suit, to work in an office with air conditioning, to hold papers instead of splinters. I promised him that night I would see it happen. Whatever it took, I would carry the load so he could chase that life. So I did. Every overtime shift, every missed hunting trip, every ache in my spine was for him. I tucked away money little by little until I had enough to send him to college. Watching him walk across that graduation stage, his tassel swinging, was one of the proudest moments of my life. I thought my sacrifice had been worth it. But things change when ambition mixes with pride. Daniel built a career in marketing, met Meredith at a company event, and married her 12 years ago. She is sharp, ambitious, always dressed like she stepped out of a catalogue. To her, life is a ladder, and she is always climbing, eyes fixed on the next rung. I could sense from the beginning she looked at me with a certain distance, like I belonged to a world beneath hers. Still, I tried. For the sake of Daniel, I tried to love her as if she were my own. Her parents, Quentin and Vanessa Northup, made no secret of their judgment. Quentin is a retired economics professor, a man who carries himself like he owns every room he enters. Vanessa comes from money and makes sure everyone knows it. They sip wine like it's liquid status and look at calloused hands as though they might stain their glassware. To them, I was not family but a blemish. For years I endured it. Every Thanksgiving when they invited me, I sat at their polished table and listened to their stories about travel and opera. I nodded, I smiled, I swallowed my discomfort, because family was worth more than pride. I thought Daniel appreciated that. I believed blood still meant something. But now, after hearing Meredith laugh about me footing their bill, after hearing my own son chuckle at my gullibility, I see the cracks clearer. Respect is not something you can buy with tuition, money, or sacrifice. It has to be given freely, and in their eyes I am still just the man who smells of sawdust, the man too simple to notice when he is being used. I live alone in the house Linda and I built, the wood weathered by decades of sun and rain. The porch sags, the shutters creak, but it is mine. In the backyard stands my workshop, a little shed filled with tools that carry stories in every dent and rust mark. I spend my days fixing small furniture for neighbors, whittling and tending to the orchard. People in town know me as steady, patient, a man who shows up when asked. That is enough for me. Yet inside, fear gnaws at me like termites hidden in beams. My greatest fear is not poverty, nor sickness, nor even death. It is losing my son completely. That bond, fragile as it may be, is the last thread tying me to the world Linda left behind. Every time Daniel calls, even when it is to ask for money, part of me lights up just to hear his voice. I tell myself it means I still matter. But after tonight, I begin to wonder, does love blind a man to the truth? Have I mistaken dependency for affection? I think of all the years I carried him, all the times I went without, so he could have more, and I feel the sting of betrayal deeper than any wound my body has ever known. Still, some part of me clings to hope. Perhaps he is only misguided, led astray by Meredith's hunger for status. Perhaps beneath the suit and the polished smile, the boy who once planted apple trees with me still lives. I cannot yet bring myself to believe that he has abandoned me entirely. But if tonight's laughter was any sign, I fear that day may not be far away. The mountains around our town hold secrets in their silent ridges. They have watched me grow from boy to man, from husband to widower, from father to something that now feels like a stranger in his own family. And as I sit on my porch, the night air wrapping around me, I feel the weight of a decision pressing closer. How long can a man endure humiliation for the sake of blood? How much can love excuse before it becomes weakness? The answers linger somewhere in the shadows, waiting. The morning after that dinner, I could hardly look at myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back, a man with silver hair and weary eyes, lines carved deep into his face from years of labor and nights of loss. I splashed cold water on my cheeks, trying to wash away the sting of Meredith's words, but shame does not rinse off so easily. It clings, invisible yet heavy, like a coat soaked through with rain. Later that week, Daniel called. His voice carried that casual tone he always used when he needed something. "Dad, about Saturday, the restaurant messed up the reservation. We had to cancel last minute. Sorry about that." His explanation slid off his tongue too smoothly, rehearsed almost, like a salesman trying to close a deal. Before I could respond, he shifted the conversation. "Listen, I could really use $1,000 to cover the mortgage this month, just until my bonus comes through." I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to my only son asking for money, as if it were no heavier than asking me to pass the salt. My hand tightened on the receiver. In that moment, I wanted to confront him, to tell him I knew the truth, but the words froze. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Of course, Daniel, I'll bring it by tomorrow." I hung up with a knot in my stomach, half angry at him for lying, half angry at myself for allowing it. That evening I walked to the corner store, a place that still smelled of coffee grounds and sawdust from its old wooden floors. Dwight, my neighbor, stood by the register buying nails and chatting with the clerk. He spotted me and said, "Hey, Ethan, did you see Daniel the other day? He was picking up flowers for Meredith's mom. Must have been a special occasion." The words hit me like a hammer. Flowers for his mother-in-law, a cancelled dinner that never was. My chest tightened as the pieces began to form a picture I did not want to see. I managed a polite smile, nodded, and said something vague before leaving, but inside I felt the walls of denial crumbling. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the house silent except for the creak of the old clock on the wall. I stared at the envelope of cash I had prepared for Daniel. My hand hovered over it, torn between love and resentment. I thought of Linda and what she would say if she was still alive. She always believed in forgiveness, always said family was worth bending for. But would she want me to bend until I broke? I remembered when Daniel was a boy, maybe 10 years old, and he lied about breaking a window with his baseball. He swore it had been an accident caused by the wind. I caught him in the lie. But instead of punishing him harshly, I sat him down and told him that honesty was the strongest currency a man could own. Once people stop trusting your word, son, it's like trying to chop wood with a dull blade, I said. It won't matter how strong your swing is, you'll never make progress. He promised me he understood. I thought that lesson had stuck. But as I stared at that envelope, I wondered if he had ever truly listened. The following days were filled with small signs that twisted the knife deeper. Frank, an old co-worker from the mill, stopped by my porch for a beer. As we talked, he casually mentioned seeing Daniel at the Mountain Lake restaurant, the fanciest place in town, dressed sharp and laughing with Meredith and her folks. He described the scene in detail, not knowing he was describing the exact night Daniel had claimed dinner was cancelled. I kept my face neutral, nodding along, but inside my blood boiled. Frank's words confirmed what my gut already suspected. My son had not only lied to me, he had excluded me deliberately, leaving me at home while he played dutiful son-in-law to the Northups. Later that evening, I picked up the phone and called Daniel. The line clicked, and when he answered, I could hear the background noise of clinking dishes. My voice trembled as I asked, "Daniel, did you go out with Meredith's parents last Saturday?" There was a pause, the kind that stretches time thin. Then he stammered, Well, yeah, but it wasn't really. I mean, it was just last minute. Nothing formal." His words tangled over themselves, a net of excuses that only confirmed the truth. I hung up before I said something I could not take back. But the storm inside me would not settle. That night, I called the restaurant directly, the Mountain Lake, pretending to inquire about reservations. The hostess, cheerful and oblivious, confirmed that a reservation under Daniel Miller had been made for 6, and no, it had never been cancelled. When I set the phone down, the silence in the house roared louder than any sawmill machine I had ever worked beside. My hands shook as I poured myself a glass of water, but even the cool liquid could not calm the fire burning in my chest. My own son had chosen to lie, to deceive, to treat me as if I were some burden better hidden away. I walked out to the porch. The night sky stretched wide above me, stars scattered like the freckles on Linda's cheeks. I thought of her then, her voice telling me to have patience, to forgive, to believe in Daniel. But forgiveness has its limits, and patience can curdle into foolishness. I could not shake the echo of Meredith's laughter, nor Daniel's careless chuckle as they mocked me. The mountains stood silent, their dark outlines like ancient judges waiting for me to make my case. And in that stillness I realized I could no longer ignore the truth. My son was not only drifting away from me, he was pulling himself further with every lie, every omission, every laugh at my expense. I knew then that I could not stay passive. A father's love might be vast, but even love must face the truth. And if Daniel thought I would remain blind, he was mistaken. Saturday evening arrived, cloaked in a kind of stillness that made my bones ache. I pulled the old suit from my closet, the one that smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs, the suit I had worn on the day Linda and I exchanged vows, the suit I had worn again, when I stood by her grave. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, the stitching loose at the hem, yet when I buttoned it, I felt a piece of her with me. A man does not put on such a garment lightly. It is a second skin, a reminder of both joy and sorrow, stitched together with memory. The drive to Mountain Lake Restaurant was long enough to let doubt gnaw at me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the headlights cutting a narrow path through the dark, as if I were tunneling into the unknown. I asked myself if I truly wanted confirmation of what my heart already knew. Sometimes truth is heavier than lies. Sometimes ignorance feels like mercy. But a man can only carry suspicion so far before it crushes him. When I arrived, the parking lot was crowded with cars that gleamed under the lamps like polished stones. I sat for a moment, breathing, gathering what little courage remained in me. Then I stepped inside. The air was rich with the scent of roasted meat and garlic butter. Violins played softly in the background, and chandeliers cast a golden glow on tables lined with crystal glasses. I felt like a farmer who had wandered into a palace, and there, in the very heart of that golden light, sat my son. Daniel wore a dark suit, crisp and modern, his tie knotted perfectly. Meredith shimmered in a dress that looked like it cost more than my truck. Her parents sat beside them, Vanessa's pearls catching the light, Quentin's posture stiff as if he were lecturing a hall of students. Beside them was Pierce, Meredith's brother, and his wife, their laughter sharp and easy. I did not approach. Instead, I walked to the bar and asked for a glass of water. From that vantage point, I could see everything, though they could not see me. My eyes fixed on Daniel's face, waiting, hoping for some flicker of discomfort, some sign that he felt my absence like a missing tooth. But he looked relaxed, even joyful, as though the weight of me had never existed. The bartender slid the glass toward me, condensation dripping down its side, but I barely touched it. My gaze never left that table. They laughed freely, their gestures wide, their voices carrying over the music, and then I saw Daniel reach into his wallet and pull out a card. My stomach clenched as I recognized it, the emergency credit card I had given him years ago when he was just starting out, a safety net I had kept open for him even after he built his career. That card was meant for rent when times were lean, for groceries in hard months, not for fine wine and steak. Watching him hand it to the waiter felt like a betrayal carved into stone. I told myself to stand up, to walk over, to let them see me and feel the weight of my presence. But my legs felt nailed to the floor. Instead, I listened, straining to catch their words, as though the room itself conspired to feed me the truth I dreaded. Daniel's voice rang out, louder than it should have been, his tone buoyant with drink. I told him I'd pay him back when I got my bonus, and he actually believes it. The old man is so gullible. The laughter that followed cracked like whips across my skin. Meredith leaned in, her lips curved in that sharp smile she wore when she thought herself clever. Did you see that suit he wears? Looks like something out of a thrift store catalogue. I swear he still smells like sawdust. Thank goodness he wasn't invited tonight. Vanessa sipped her wine and added with a disdainful sigh, "Can you imagine introducing him at the club? What would people think? An economics professor forced to acknowledge a sawmill worker as family. Unthinkable." Quentin gave a dry chuckle, shaking his head as though even the thought insulted him. Appearances matter. Reputation matters. Best to keep such connections at a polite distance. Their voices blurred together, each word a blade, each laugh another strike. I sat frozen, my chest hollow, as if the life had been scooped from inside me. The people who were supposed to be my family, my son among them, were united not in love, but in ridicule. I thought of the nights I worked until my hands bled so Daniel could have a better future. I thought of Linda's gentle smile, the way she believed our sacrifices would build a bridge to something brighter. Yet here I was, invisible, erased, a ghost haunting the corner of a restaurant. Something inside me hardened then, like steel cooling in water. I had endured enough. This was no longer about patience or forgiveness. It was about dignity, the only wealth a man like me truly owns. They could mock my suit, my calloused hands, my simple life, but they would not mock my worth forever. I finished the glass of water in one long swallow, set it on the counter, and walked out without a word. The night air outside was cold, biting, but it steadied me. I knew what I had to do. For years, I had been the silent supporter, the background figure, the father who gave without question. But silence has a limit, and they had pushed me past it. That night, back in my home, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had not used in years. Lloyd Prescott, my old friend from the mill, now an inspector for the IRS. My hand trembled slightly as I waited for his voice, but inside me burned a strange calm. If Daniel thought he could mock me without consequence, he was wrong. The time had come to let truth do its work. When I returned home that night, the house greeted me with silence so thick it felt alive. The walls seemed to lean in closer, the floor groaned beneath my steps, and even the photographs on the mantel carried a kind of quiet judgment. Linda's face stared out from the frame, her smile steady and patient, her eyes filled with the kind of warmth that could soften stone. I set my keys on the counter and sank into the armchair, staring at her picture as if she could answer the storm inside me. I whispered to her the way I often did when the weight of the world pressed too hard. "Did you hear them, Linda? Did you hear what they said about me? Our son, our flesh and blood, laughing as if I were nothing more than a fool." My throat tightened and the words came out jagged. I gave him everything. I carried him through school, sent him to college, kept food on the table, and now he repays me with lies and laughter. The silence that followed was unbearable. I tried to close my eyes, to drift into sleep, but the voices from that restaurant would not let me rest. They circled in my mind like crows around carrion. Gullible, sawdust, beneath them. Each word replayed until it carved itself into my skin. I rose and paced the living room, my steps heavy, my fists clenched. The anger I had buried for years was clawing its way to the surface. Finally, I picked up the phone and dialed Lloyd. He answered with the same rough chuckle I remembered from our mill days. "Ethan Miller, I'll be damned. Been too long, old friend." I tried to match his cheer, but my voice came out heavy. "Lloyd, I need your help, and it's not the kind of help a neighbor gives with a leaky roof." There was a pause, then his tone shifted, serious now. "Talk to me." I told him everything. I told him about Daniel's lies, the cancelled dinner, the mortgage money, the reservation that was never cancelled. I told him about the laughter at the restaurant, about the credit card I recognized, but most of all I told him about the documents Daniel had slipped in front of me years ago, papers I had signed without question because he was my son. He had said they were routine forms for elderly care expenses, a way to save on taxes, and I had trusted him. Now, with Meredith and her family mocking me openly, I realized those papers might hold more than harmless savings. Lloyd listened quietly, the sound of his breathing steady on the line. When I finished, he spoke with a firmness that made my spine straighten. "Ethan, if he used your name on false filings, that's fraud. And if he's been doing it for years, it's not just fraud, it's a noose tightening around both your necks. You could go down with him if you don't act." The words struck me cold. For a moment I could not breathe. I had imagined betrayal, disrespect, lies, but I had not imagined criminal danger. The thought that my son might have used my name, my trust, to build his own false fortune made me feel sick. "What do I do, Lloyd?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "You let me dig, quietly. I'll check the records. I'll follow the trail. But Ethan, you have to be ready. Once this starts, there's no going back. If we uncover fraud, your boy won't just be embarrassed, he'll be ruined." I sat in silence, staring at the photograph of Linda again. What would she want? Would she want me to protect Daniel at all costs, even if it meant carrying his sins on my back? Or would she want me to stand for truth, for dignity, for the kind of man she believed I was? Finally I said, "Do it. Whatever you find, I need to know." After I hung up, the house felt heavier, as though it knew the path I had chosen. I walked to the backyard, to the orchard Linda and I had planted together. The moonlight spilled over the trees, their crooked branches reaching toward the sky like hands begging for something unseen. I touched the bark of the nearest apple tree, rough and scarred, and whispered, "I will not let him drag me deeper. Not this time." The days that followed were long and restless. Every ring of the phone made my stomach knot. Every envelope in the mail felt like it might contain the truth that would unravel everything. I kept working in my workshop, sanding wood, fixing chairs, but my mind was never steady. Each scrape of the sandpaper felt like a countdown. One evening, Lloyd called back. His voice was low, urgent. "Ethan, I found enough to sink a ship. He's been claiming thousands each year under your name. Elderly care deductions, medical expenses, even loans taken out with your signature forged. He's built a tower of lies so high, it's a wonder it hasn't toppled already. If the IRS takes a closer look, and they will once I tip them, Daniel is finished." I sat down hard, the weight of his words pressing me into the chair. "Finished," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. I had wanted dignity. I had wanted respect, but hearing the reality of his crimes felt like swallowing fire. Lloyd hesitated before adding, "Ethan, this isn't just about him anymore. If you don't separate yourself, they could come after you too. You need to cut the ties, shut down the accounts, block the cards, protect yourself." The thought of cutting Daniel off entirely was like ripping my own heart from my chest. Yet I knew Lloyd was right. Blood may bind, but it cannot excuse betrayal forever. I thought of the laughter at the restaurant, the way Daniel's voice had curled around the word gullible, and I felt the resolve settle inside me like stone. That night, as the clock ticked past midnight, I gathered every document, every credit card, every file that tied me to Daniel's reckless choices. I stacked them on the table, the piles standing like a monument to misplaced trust. One by one, I began to sever the links. If he had chosen deceit, then I would choose survival. For the first time in years, I felt a strange clarity. The storm had not yet broken, but I knew it was coming. And when it did, I would no longer be the fool in the corner of the restaurant. I would be the man who stood for his own dignity, no matter the cost. The morning after I burned through half the night sorting papers, I woke with a stiffness in my bones that felt older than time itself. Sunlight leaked through the blinds, pale and hesitant, as though even the day itself was cautious to disturb me. I brewed coffee strong enough to scrape the rust from my insides and sat at the kitchen table, the pile of documents still waiting where I had left them. They stared at me like silent witnesses, each sheet a reminder of the trust I had signed away too easily. I called the bank first. My voice trembled slightly as I asked the woman on the other end to freeze every joint account Daniel had access to. She confirmed politely, her tone professional, but I imagined her eyebrows rising as she typed. Then I cancelled the emergency credit card I had seen him use, the same card that once felt like a lifeline. Cutting it felt like slicing through a tether that had connected us for decades. My chest ached, but I knew there was no other way. Next, I drove into town, a folder of statements under my arm. The streets were busy with Saturday errands, neighbors waving as I passed, children riding bicycles along the sidewalks. To them, I was still the same steady Ethan, the man who fixed their chairs and lent a hand when storms knocked down fences. None of them knew the storm brewing inside me, a storm that threatened to wash away what little peace I still carried. Lloyd met me at a small diner tucked near the highway. He wore the same flannel shirt I remembered from our mill days, though his hair had thinned and his belly rounded. We shook hands, the kind of handshake that carries years of unspoken trust. Over black coffee and eggs, he laid out what he had found. His notes were precise, every figure and date lined up like nails, hammered into a coffin. "Ethan, he's been running this for years," he said quietly, glancing around the diner to make sure no one overheard. "If investigators start digging, and I'm certain they will once I send this forward, Daniel's life as he knows it is over." I sat back, the vinyl seat squeaking under my weight, and tried to swallow the truth. The boy I had once carried on my shoulders through summer fairs, the boy who used to fall asleep against my chest after long days of play, had grown into a man willing to use his father's name as a shield for lies. That realization pressed harder than any physical labor I had ever done. Lloyd reached across the table, his voice softer now. I know this hurts, Ethan, but you've got to see it clear. If you let this go, you'll be dragged under with him, and Linda wouldn't want that for you. And, at the mention of her name, I felt a crack in my resolve. Linda, with her gentle hands and patient spirit, always urging me to believe in Daniel, always telling me love could guide him right. I wanted to believe she was correct, that beneath the arrogance and ambition there was still the boy we had raised. But the evidence lay in front of me like stone tablets, undeniable. I left the diner with a decision heavy in my chest. I would protect myself, and if that meant exposing Daniel, then so be it. A father's love may bend, but it cannot break without consequence. The days turned into weeks, each one heavier than the last. Daniel called often, always with a request. A little money for this bill, a small loan to cover that expense. Each time I told him I could not, my voice steady but my heart tearing. The silence on the other end of the line spoke louder than his words. He grew colder, shorter with me, his tone clipped like a man speaking to a stranger. Meredith never called, not once, though I knew her influence guided every word Daniel spoke. One evening, as the autumn leaves turned the mountainside into a canvas of gold and crimson, Daniel arrived at my house, unannounced. He stood in the doorway, shoulders stiff, eyes sharp. "Dad, what's going on? The accounts are frozen. The card doesn't work. I'm getting notices from the bank. Did you do this?" His voice carried more accusation than concern. I met his eyes, searching for some flicker of the boy I had raised. But all I saw was frustration, the kind of frustration that comes when comfort is threatened. "Yes, Daniel," I said slowly. "I did it. I had to. You've been lying to me, using me, and I can't keep letting it happen." For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and brittle. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think you know everything, don't you? You think you can control me, but you don't understand how the world works. You've always been stuck in this small town, working with your hands, content with scraps. I've built something bigger, something better. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the fool they say you are." His words cut deeper than he knew. I stood straighter, forcing calm into my voice. "Better men than you have fallen, Daniel, and when truth comes knocking, no lie is big enough to keep it out." He shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and stormed off into the night. I watched him go, his figure swallowed by darkness, and my heart ached with the weight of both love and sorrow. That night I sat on the porch, the cool air biting my skin, and thought about the orchard. Those trees had survived storms, droughts, even the years when I neglected them after Linda passed. They stood crooked but alive, proof that roots matter more than appearances. My son had forgotten his roots, blinded by the shine of Meredith's world. But roots have a way of calling back when storms strip everything else away. The investigation moved forward quietly. Lloyd kept me informed, his voice steady, his updates precise. Each call revealed more. Loans in my name, false claims stretching back nearly a decade, payments shuffled through accounts like shells in a game. It was a house of cards, and the wind was beginning to blow. I knew the storm would not only hit Daniel, it would hit me too, in ways that hurt more than money. The town would whisper, neighbors would wonder, and the name Miller, once tied to honest labor, would be dragged through mud. But I also knew that silence would chain me to his crimes forever. I could not carry his sins any longer. As the leaves fell and the air grew colder, I prepared myself for what was coming. I told myself this was not about revenge, not about humiliation returned for humiliation given. It was about truth, about dignity, about the simple fact that a father's love should not be mistaken for weakness. And deep down, I prayed that when the fall finally came, Daniel would understand that it was not hatred that drove me, but love, the kind of love that demands honesty, the kind of love that refuses to let lies destroy everything it touches. The letter came on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked among the usual stack of grocery ads and utility bills. Its envelope was heavy, stamped with the seal of the Internal Revenue Service. My hands trembled as I turned it over, my pulse drumming in my ears. Though Lloyd had warned me, Though I knew this day was coming, the sight of that seal made the weight of it real. I carried it to the kitchen table, laid it beside Linda's photograph, and stared at it for a long while. Opening it felt like splitting open a wound I had been trying to bandage for weeks. At last I tore it open. The words were sharp, official, unfeeling. They spoke of discrepancies, of records under investigation, of names and numbers that linked directly back to me. They spoke of Daniel. I sat there for hours. The letter spread before me, the autumn sun crawling across the floor until it slipped into shadow. When the phone finally rang, I answered with a voice hoarse from silence. Lloyd was on the line. "You got it, didn't you?" "Yes," I whispered. "Don't panic. This is the start, not the end. They'll want to meet with you. You tell the truth, you hand them every scrap of paper you have, and you let me guide you through it. You're not the one they're after. They're after him." I nodded, though he could not see me. My gaze drifted to the orchard outside the window. The trees had begun shedding leaves, their branches skeletal against the grey sky. They looked stripped bare, exposed, but still standing. I told myself I had to be like those trees. The following week, I drove to the city office where the investigators waited. The building was tall, cold, its walls humming with fluorescent light. I felt out of place. A man shaped by sawdust and sweat, sitting across from officials in pressed suits. They asked questions that cut straight through me. Questions about signatures, about accounts I had never touched, about numbers that made my head spin. I answered as best I could, steady, truthful. At times my throat closed, shame curling in my chest, but I forced the words out. When I mentioned Daniel, their pens scratched faster. They exchanged glances, quiet but telling. One of them leaned forward and said, "Mr. Miller, from everything we see, it appears your son has been committing fraud in your name. We'll need your full cooperation to protect you." I swallowed hard. Protect me. The phrase stung because beneath it lay the truth. Protect me from my own son. Driving home that evening, the mountains loomed dark against the fading sky. My truck rattled on the old road, and I gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. I thought of Daniel, wondered if he had any idea the storm was about to break over his head. Did he know the walls were closing in? Or was he still laughing in some polished dining room, confident that his lies were impenetrable? That night Daniel called. His voice was sharp, hurried. "Dad, what did you do?" "I got a notice from the IRS. They're asking questions, digging around my files. Did you talk to someone?" My breath caught. The urge to lie, to soften the truth, rose instinctively, but I forced it down. "Yes, Daniel, they came to me. I told them the truth." Silence filled the line. Then his voice exploded, louder than I had ever heard it. "You betrayed me. After everything I've done, after all I've built, you're siding with them? You're siding against your own son?" My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. "No, Daniel, I'm siding with what's right. You dragged my name into this mess without my consent. You forged, you lied, you took. I won't let you bury me under your mistakes." His voice dropped, colder now, dripping with venom. "You'll regret this. You think they'll protect you? You think they care about some washed-up mill worker? They'll toss you aside as soon as they get what they want, and when I'm gone, you'll have no one." I closed my eyes, the words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. "Better no one, Daniel, than a son who treats me as nothing more than a tool." The line went dead. I sat there listening to the dial tone, the echo of finality humming in my ear. Sleep would not come that night. I walked the orchard under the pale glow of the moon, the cold earth crunching beneath my boots. Each tree stood silent, branches stretched like arms pleading to the sky. I thought of the years Linda and I had nurtured those trees, watered them, pruned them, protected them from frost. They had given fruit in return, simple and sweet. That was how I had believed family worked. You give, you nurture, and in time love grows. But what do you do when the tree you planted turns against you, when its fruit is poisoned? Do you cut it down, or do you keep hoping for one good harvest? I did not have the answer, but I knew the choice was no longer mine alone. The truth had taken root, and it would grow no matter how much I wished otherwise. The next morning, Lloyd stopped by. He carried a stack of files, his expression grim. "It's worse than we thought," he said, spreading the papers across my table. "Loans in your name, multiple credit lines. He's been digging deeper than anyone realized. Ethan, this isn't just fraud. It's theft, plain and simple." I stared at the papers until the numbers blurred. My chest felt hollow, a cavern echoing with all the years I had worked to give Daniel more than I ever had. "He's my son," I said softly, the words barely escaping. Lloyd's gaze was steady but kind. "And he's made choices, Ethan. Choices that have consequences. Love doesn't erase them." I nodded slowly, my jaw tight. "Then let the consequences come." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering leaves across the yard, like fragments of broken promises. The storm arrived faster than even Lloyd expected. Within 2 weeks, officials came knocking, not at my door, but at Daniel's. I heard about it first from Dwight, my neighbor, who had been in town when the black government cars pulled up outside Daniel's office. He told me how agents in dark suits carried boxes of files through the lobby, their expressions unreadable, while Daniel stood pale and speechless near the entrance. The town buzzed with whispers before the sun even set. That evening, my phone rang again, and this time it was not Daniel but Meredith. Her voice, usually sharp and dripping with confidence, was frayed and trembling. "Ethan, do you know what's happening? They're tearing apart our lives. Daniel says you talked to them. Tell me it's not true." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Meredith, I told them the truth. I had no choice." Her tone snapped, fury laced with fear. "You ruined us, do you understand? You've destroyed everything we've built." I let her words wash over me, heavy but not unexpected. "I didn't destroy it. Lies did. Fraud did. Choices did. All I did was refuse to drown with you." She hung up without another word, and the silence afterward was almost sweet. For the first time in years, I felt the weight begin to shift off my shoulders, but relief did not erase pain. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the dark horizon. Memories crowded my mind. Daniel at age 5 chasing fireflies in the yard. Daniel at age 16 holding his driver's license with a grin. Daniel at age 22 walking across the stage in his cap and gown while I cheered with tears in my eyes. Each memory felt like a stone in my chest. The boy I raised was not the man now collapsing under the weight of his own greed, and that truth broke me more than any insult Meredith could throw. The investigation deepened. Newspapers began printing small blurbs about financial fraud in our county, never naming names at first, but hinting enough for locals to piece it together. Friends avoided me at the store, their smiles thin, their eyes filled with questions they were too polite to ask. I carried myself with quiet dignity, but inside I felt stripped raw. One afternoon, as I repaired a chair in my workshop, Lloyd arrived again. He set his hat on the bench, wiped his brow, and said, "They've confirmed it all. Daniel's name is at the center. Loans in your identity, deductions stacked year after year. The fines alone could crush him. Prison isn't off the table." The hammer slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. My knees weakened, and I sat down hard on the stool. Prison. The word echoed like a bell inside my skull. I had prepared myself for shame, for financial ruin, for anger, but the thought of my son behind bars was a wound I hadn't braced for. I stared at Lloyd, my voice low and cracked. "Is there nothing left to save him?" Lloyd sighed. "He made his choices, Ethan. The system doesn't bend just because he's your son. The best you can do is stay clear, protect yourself, and let him face what he's earned." That night I dreamt of the orchard again. In the dream, one tree stood blackened, its branches brittle and lifeless, while the others bore fruit. I stood with an axe in my hand, torn between cutting it down or letting it rot among the living. When I woke, sweat soaked my shirt, and the echo of Linda's voice lingered faintly in my mind. "Some things you can't fix for them." The days that followed blurred together. Daniel did not call, not once. I heard through town gossip that he and Meredith had packed boxes, moving out of their house under threat of repossession. The image of my son, once so proud, so determined to climb higher than I ever had reduced, to scrambling for scraps, tore at me, yet I could not ignore the cold fact that he had brought it upon himself. One evening, just as the sun melted into the ridgeline and painted the sky in bruised purples and gold, Daniel finally appeared. He stood at the edge of my porch, shoulders slumped, eyes bloodshot. He looked older than his 42 years, beaten not by labor but by consequences. "Dad," he said softly, almost a whisper. I waited, letting the silence stretch. He sank onto the steps, his hands covering his face. For a long while we said nothing, only the crickets filling the air between us. At last he muttered, "I never thought it would end like this." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Son, things don't end. They change, and you have to decide what you'll do with the pieces left." His shoulders shook, but whether from anger or grief I could not tell. He looked at me finally, eyes wet. "I thought you'd always cover me. I thought no matter what, you'd save me." My throat tightened, but I forced the truth out steady. "A father can guide, he can provide, he can love, but he cannot live your life for you. I won't carry your lies anymore." Tears streaked his face as he turned away. I wanted to reach out, to pull him close like when he was a boy, but my hands stayed still. Some lessons can only be learned when love steps aside. When he left that night, the porch felt emptier than ever. Yet beneath the ache, there was also peace. The storm had stripped everything bare, but like the orchard in winter, I knew spring would come again. Maybe not for us together, maybe not soon, but someday truth might plant a seed where lies once grew. The weeks after Daniel's visit stretched long and heavy, like winter nights that refused to end. The town had already heard the full story. The newspaper finally printed names, and my son's face appeared beside headlines that spoke of fraud, deception, and charges pending. Each word felt like a knife carving into my family name. People I had known for decades avoided eye contact when they saw me at the market. Some whispered pity, others judgment. I kept my head high, but inside I carried a wound deeper than any I had earned at the mill. Meredith disappeared quickly after the news broke. Word traveled that she had gone back to her parents, clinging to the wealth and comfort she had always worshipped. Vanessa and Quentin, once so proud, now spoke of her marriage as if it were a youthful mistake. They cut Daniel loose, as though he had never been part of their family at all. Their laughter, once cruelly aimed at me, turned inward to silence. They had no place for a son-in-law stripped of status. Daniel, meanwhile, was left adrift. His house went into foreclosure, his job vanished under the weight of scandal, and the friends who had shared drinks and handshakes melted away when his name soured in the papers. He called once, his voice low and broken, asking if he could come stay with me until things settled. My chest ached as he spoke, because every part of me wanted to open the door wide, to let him collapse into the home where he had grown up. But I thought of the orchard, of how a tree infected must be pruned before it ruins the whole grove. I told him gently, "Not now, Daniel. You need to stand on your own feet. If I carry you again, you'll never learn." The silence that followed was thick, and when he hung up, I knew he hated me for it. But love sometimes looks like cruelty when truth demands it. Nights became the hardest. I sat on the porch watching the stars blink over the mountains, my heart wrestling with memories. I saw Daniel as a child, running barefoot through the yard, laughter echoing like music. I saw him at Christmas, eyes wide as he unwrapped gifts Linda had carefully chosen. I saw him graduating, my chest swelling with pride. Those images warred against the man who had lied, cheated, and mocked me. I asked myself over and over, was it my failure as a father that led him here? Did I give too much, make life too easy, shelter him so fully that he never learned consequence until it was too late? Some nights I whispered to Linda's picture, asking her what I should do. In the quiet I almost imagined her voice, soft and steady, reminding me that love is not erased by disappointment. But forgiveness, she would say, does not mean forgetting. Forgiveness is choosing not to let bitterness rot the soul. even when wounds remain. The investigation dragged on. Courts demanded appearances, lawyers scribbled notes, and Daniel's life unraveled thread by thread. I did not attend the hearings, though part of me longed to. I feared if I saw him standing there in shame, my resolve would crack. Instead, I kept to my workshop, hands busy with wood, heart heavy with silence. The sound of sanding, of saws cutting, became my prayers. Each chair I repaired, each table I mended, felt like a small act of holding the world together while my family splintered. Neighbors began to stop by again after a while. They brought pies, conversation, and cautious sympathy. Dwight came often, sitting on the porch with me, sipping coffee, and talking about small things, the weather, the harvest, the town fair. He never pressed about Daniel, and I was grateful. Sometimes the kindest thing a man can do is sit beside another in silence. Then one evening, months after the storm had broken, Daniel came again. He looked thinner, his face hollow, his clothes worn. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something brittle, almost childlike. He did not ask to stay, did not raise his voice. He simply sat on the steps where he had once sat as a boy, and said, "Dad, I don't know who I am anymore." The words pierced me deeper than any accusation. For the first time I saw not the fraud, not the liar, not the man swallowed by greed, but my son lost, broken, stripped bare. I sat beside him, our shoulders almost touching, and said quietly, "Then maybe it's time to start again. But this time, you build with truth, not lies." He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes, though he said nothing more. We sat until the stars filled the sky, two men bound by blood, divided by choices, yet still tethered by something neither of us could sever completely. In the days that followed, I thought often about what forgiveness might look like. It would not be simple, not quick, and perhaps not complete. Trust, once shattered, does not return whole. It comes back like wood glued together, functional, but scarred, never the same as before. Yet even scarred wood can hold weight, can serve, can endure. I began to let a small hope stir, fragile as the first bud of spring in the orchard. Perhaps one day Daniel and I would share laughter again, not the false kind that hides contempt, but the kind that comes from honesty. Perhaps one day he would remember the lessons of his childhood, the values I had tried to plant in him. Until then, I would stand steady, as I always had, not bending to lies, but open to truth. As winter crept into the mountains, snow dusted the orchard, coating the branches in white. I stood there one morning, breath clouding in the cold, and realized something. The trees endure because their roots run deep, unseen beneath the soil, anchoring them even when storms strip them bare. My love for my son was like those roots. It could not be cut away, even by betrayal. But whether the tree above would bear fruit again, that choice was his. And so I waited, not with the blind patience of before, but with eyes wide open, dignity intact, heart scarred yet still beating with hope. As I sit here now, the winter wind rattling the windows and the orchard sleeping beneath its blanket of snow, I think about everything that has passed. My son's laughter at my expense, the humiliation in that golden-lit restaurant, the heavy steps of investigators, the silence that followed it all, feels like a lifetime compressed into one season. I carry the scars of it, yes, but I also carry something else, clarity. A father's love is wide, but it is not without boundaries. Love does not mean surrendering dignity. Love does not mean allowing yourself to be used until there is nothing left to give. What I have learned is that respect must walk hand in hand with love, and when respect is broken, both sides pay the price. If you are watching this, perhaps you are a parent yourself. Maybe you have carried the weight of sacrifice silently, working long hours, giving up comforts, so your children could reach higher than you ever could. And maybe, like me, you have felt that sting when the ones you love most fail to see the cost of what you gave. It is a pain sharper than any other, because it comes not from strangers, but from your own blood. But here is what I know now. Even when trust is shattered, even when respect is trampled, love can remain. Love does not excuse the wrongdoing, but it can guide the way back. It can hold space for redemption without surrendering truth. My son may never return to the boy I once knew, but if he chooses to change, my heart will be open. Not gullible, not blind, but open. To every son and daughter listening, remember this. Your parents are not an endless well of money or favors. They are flesh and blood, hearts that bruise easily, souls that only ask for your respect. Do not mistake their patience for weakness. Do not turn their sacrifice into your entitlement. And to every parent, stand firm. Love with all you have, but hold your dignity close. Because when we honor ourselves, we teach our children what true strength looks like. If this story touched you, if you believe parents deserve both love and respect, I ask you to support this channel. Subscribe, share it with others, and let this message ripple outward. Because the world is filled with fathers and mothers like me, standing in quiet corners, waiting to be seen not as wallets, not as relics, but as people worthy of honor. Let us remind the world together. A parent's love may be unconditional, but trust is not.